I want to give a special shout out to all my patrons, my Bibliosprand, Bibliohowlers, and Bibliomancers. Thank you so much for supporting my hobby and passion even more. It means so much to me. Hi everyone, Petrik here. Today's video will be something new on the channel. But this is not something that hasn't been done before by other YouTubers or booktubers. Today's video will be about the advantages and disadvantages of physical books versus ebooks and versus audiobooks. And which one is my ultimate reading preference. And yeah, I know that this topic has been discussed by many other booktubers and YouTubers. And it is most likely that I cannot offer anything new here. But I just want to share my experience because I have actually finished some books using physical books, audiobooks. Yes, audiobooks as well, even though it is only for 1 or 2 books. And of course, ebooks. But before we get to talk about the main advantages, some of the main advantages and disadvantages of each medium, as far as reading experience goes, I don't know about you, but every time this topic comes up, my mind always instantly think, which one is actually more environmental friendly? That's really one of the factors of comparison that I think about. Now, instant thinking usually always means that I will choose ebook and audiobook as the answer to this question. But after doing some research, turns out it is not quite true. There are various degrees to consider, such as the production and delivery of physical books and also e-readers, and how much each reader read or collect physical books need to be taken into account as well. If you're curious about this, just like me, today's sponsor, RAND, can help you track this. RAND is a public benefit corporation launched in 2019 to unlock individuals' collective action against the climate crisis. Over $4 million has been funded to plant trees, protect rainforests, and other projects to fight the climate crisis. RAND is an efficient and effective way to make a difference in the climate crisis, as it is a website where you can calculate your carbon footprint and then offset it by funding a diverse mix of carbon reduction projects like rainforest protection, mineral weathering, and tree planting, which I think we physical book readers and collectors need to support more. Once you start contributing, you get to see what your money is spent on in the form of photos and details of, for example, every tree planted or every acre reforested. The first 100 people who sign up using the link in the description will have 10 extra trees planted in their name. Thank you so much to RAND for sponsoring today's video. Do let me know what you think about this topic. Now I want to share my thoughts regarding each medium. Let's start from the classic, the physical books. I'm going to start by talking about the advantages first. And of course, I will have to start with the best feeling or tactile. I know this may sound like something simple, and I don't think voracious readers will think too highly about this factor. I've talked with plenty of readers who doesn't read too many books per year, and the majority of them actually answer they do not care about the feeling of turning the pages. But when I ask readers who read a lot of books, they definitely consider this as one of the advantages of physical books. And I, as a reader who usually read physical books and ebooks per year about, I think the number is about equal, I must say that the tactile feeling of the pages on my hand as I progress through the book I'm reading is just unbeatable. I think many readers will understand and agree with me regarding these seemingly simple things of feeling the pages as we turn the pages of a book we're reading. And still related to the first advantage, I would say that the second advantage of a physical book is seeing tangible progress, especially in bigger books. I am mostly a fantasy and sci-fi readers, and the books that I usually read, they are massive. They're big. And to me, it always feels satisfying to see tangible progress in my reading journey. For example, if I read 200 pages per day, at the end of the day, I will put a bookmark to mark my progress. And even that, seeing that in person feels satisfying to me. It's like I can really see and think, wow, I've read this many pages today. And that feeling of closing the physical book after I finished it always makes me feel like I have accomplished something, especially when the book is amazing. And the third main advantage of a physical book is aesthetic. I'm going to use one example here. This is The Knight of the Seven Kingdoms by George R.R. Martin. This is a prequel spin-off to A Song of Ice and Fire main series. And this is the cover art, this is the spine, and this is the back cover. Now, even just seeing the cover art alone already feels better than seeing the cover art on ebook. I love cover art, I love physical books, I love seeing a cover art printed on a physical book. I think that's the best way to look at the cover art. But to make things even better, when I'm talking about aesthetic, I'm talking about maps and sometimes interior artworks inside a physical book. Just to give one example here, this is one of the interior artworks inside A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms. Seeing this in a physical format looks much better than seeing it on Kindle or ebooks. So much better. A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms have many artworks, interior artworks, all of them done by Gary Gianni. And to me, seeing all these interior artworks on physical book versus ebooks are entirely different reading experience. Because the majority of the time on ebooks, the map or the interior artworks doesn't display nicely. And as an epic fantasy reader where maps are usually involved heavily, it is not a fun thing to go back and forth looking at the small looking map when I'm reading the epic fantasy novel. It's better to go back and forth using a physical book, and yeah, the map looks much better in a physical format. And finally, the last advantage of physical book, they look super nice on the bookshelves. Look, I think that is a big advantage. I don't know about you, but sometimes when I'm feeling down and I take a look at the collection of books I have on my bookshelves, I feel calmer. And also sometimes I wonder and think, wow, I have read these many books. I daydream about adventuring to all these worlds and also thinking about the characters that I met and the stories that I experienced. So that's 4 main advantages of physical book. But what about the disadvantage? And the first one, I think I will have to say, physical books are often more expensive than ebooks. They are expensive. I can't believe that. I used to actually think that, you know what? Book collecting and reading books will be cheaper than playing video game as a hobby. Oh my god, I am so wrong about this. Like, completely wrong. Reading where I live is an incredibly expensive hobby. It is expensive. It is not cheap, especially even more if we're talking about special editions. And the second disadvantage of physical book, they are not space friendly. I know that recently I just mentioned how beautiful they look on the bookshelves, but at the same time, spaces are limited. So it is impossible for me to store all the physical books that I want, even though I want to own so many of them. I want to build my own library like in The Beauty and the Beast, okay? I want to have that kind of library someday. But I don't live in a Disney world, I'm not rich, and I don't own that kind of spaces and money. So yeah, spaces is always a problem when it comes to collecting physical books. And does that mean that I will stop collecting physical books? No, I won't. I think many of you can understand the struggle, and if there's no other option, well, we have our floors as a bookshelf. Yeah. And the third disadvantage of physical book, I think they are impractical. They are not easy to carry around everywhere, especially if we're talking about big hardcovers like the Stormlight Archive. Can you imagine bringing physical books like The Way of Kings or Words of Radiance on your holiday, or maybe when you're going around somewhere? It is a different story if we're talking about a paperback, especially mass market paperback. But still, if we're talking about convenience in this factor, I think ebook definitely win over a physical book. And finally, one of the main disadvantages of reading a physical book, sometimes they are uncomfortable to read, especially if we're talking about stiff hardcovers like this one, A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms. Here's an example. See? Usually with UK hardcovers, you always have to hold them because they cannot stay still. You always have to hold them like this. Otherwise, well, see, you cannot read them. And reading a book like this, sometimes it gets really tiring and it's hard to find a comfortable position to read. It is easier if you're talking about floppy hardcovers or floppy paperbacks. They are usually published in the United States. This is just one example. This is Countryside by the Robert Jackson Bennett. And this is an example of a floppy hardcovers. See, you can just open it like this and it will just stay like this. You can put it on a table, you can put it on your bed, and then you can just read it without constantly holding them down. Floppy hardcovers and floppy paperbacks are usually my preference of reading. You can even read while holding it with one hand like this, see? And it's not too heavy. If we're talking about hardcover that isn't as big as The Way of Kings by Brandon Sanderson, this is just an example. I think it's easier for me to give you a comparison, because The Way of Kings, the Stormlight Archive, each book in that series is massive. But I hope you understand what I mean here. Sometimes it's just impractical and it's not comfortable to read using a hardcover. But that's for physical book. Now let's talk about the advantage and disadvantages of ebook. I'm going to use my Kindle as the main example here because I read ebooks mostly using Kindle Paperwhite. So most of the advantage and disadvantage are pretty much opposite of physical books. The first one being space friendly. You can read many books using only one device. And yeah, for those of you who don't know, Kindle Paperwhite can store about hundreds or even thousands of books inside this one device. And the second advantage, you can bring this anywhere. You can bring this on a holiday trip, and as long as there is Wi-Fi or internet, you can just download anything in your digital library. And the third advantage, this is very lightweight. The practicality of Kindle or e-readers, they are very hard to beat in my opinion. It is easy to find a comfortable position to read, and again, you can bring this anywhere. You can read this on the plane, you can read them on the train, and if you get bored with one book, you can just switch to another book immediately. And one of the biggest advantage of ebooks, they are often cheaper than physical books, like so much more cheaper. If we're talking about discount, sometimes 1,000 pages book, 1,000 pages and popular fantasy or sci-fi books can be discounted up to maybe $1 or $2. That's insane. On my digital library, I own the entire Kingkiller Chronicle, I own the entire First Law World by Joe Abercrombie, I own the entire Cosmere books by Brandon Sanderson. And you know what? I got them, each and every one of them, on discount for $1 or $2. And we can also share library with our family or friends. The only way I'm able to read so many books is because I share my digital library, or well, my co-blogger share her digital library with me. And guess what? She owns so many books, like thousands of books on her digital library on Kindle. And I have access to every one of them. So yeah, it is insanely convenient. Now, what about the disadvantage? Well, you cannot fill any paper on Kindle. And I know that sounds like a simple thing, but it is a big deal, okay? It is a big deal. Sometimes it doesn't feel like we're reading a book, sometimes, even though I know that this is still a book and I read a lot on my Kindle. And the second disadvantage is that the aesthetic doesn't look good. I mean, you cannot display your e-readers on your bookshelves. You can only display this one, tada, over here, that's it. Unless of course you want to collect 100 e-readers for whatever purpose, then suit yourself, right? But you get what I mean. You can't display e-readers like you display books on your bookshelves. And also, let's talk about cover art, interior artworks, and maps. They are pretty much close to being redundant on e-readers. Not always, because sometimes interior artworks still look good on Kindle, but there have been cases where they look really bad, especially if we're talking about maps. Maps just doesn't display nicely on Kindle. They are too small, and the quality of the files on Kindle are often not satisfying to look at. And the last disadvantage for me is that when I read using Kindle, I don't know about you, I don't know whether you feel the same about this like I do or not, but when I'm reading a long book, somehow it feels even longer reading on Kindle, especially if I display the percentage. I recently finished reading Of War and Ruin by Ryan Cahill. That book is 430,000 words long. When I forgot to turn off the display, the percentage moved up only after I flipped through like 15 or 16 times. Yeah, on Kindle it is written every 14 minutes I progress by 1%. And to me that makes the book somehow feels longer, even though it is technically still the same as reading from a physical book. Somehow it's just different seeing tangible progress and seeing the number move up. And that's for ebooks and e-readers. And now let's talk about audiobooks. Pretty much almost all the advantage and disadvantage of ebooks can be transferred to audiobooks. But there is one benefit of audiobook. The biggest benefit of audiobook is that we can finish a story while doing other activities. This is why I'm so envious of people who can use audiobook every day of their lives. I cannot. As I mentioned, I have finished probably only 1 or 2 stories, and they are both novellas using audiobook, and even then I struggled so hard already. And also this will differ among readers, but there are plenty of audiobook users who use 2 times speed, sometimes even 3 times to 4 times speed. I think they are all superhuman, to me. They are all superhuman. No judgment from me, but from my perspective, all of you really sounds like superhuman to me. 4 times speed to me sounds like a magic or summoning are constantly being casted by the audiobook narrator, and I applaud every one of you who can listen and comprehend audiobooks at whatever speed. I am truly amazed. I think for the other advantage, they are mostly the same as ebooks. As for disadvantages, this applied only to me. I cannot concentrate using audiobooks. I think it is harder to concentrate using audiobooks, especially when we're talking about epic fantasy books with many names. And also the other disadvantage, this is relatively rare. If interior artworks and maps are available, we cannot use them to our advantage when we're experiencing the book through audiobook. And just like ebooks and e-readers, you cannot display audiobook tangibly. So yeah, I think that's pretty much it. That's some of the advantage and disadvantages of physical book, ebooks, and also audiobook. And ultimately, my overall preference are physical book and also ebook using e-readers. I have reached a state in my life where I pretty much felt comfortable, very much comfortable reading through these two mediums. But this is only if we're talking about books with only words in it. If we're talking about books or special editions with interior artworks or map, I will always choose physical book. So I guess overall, my number one preference of reading will always be physical book. Just slightly above ebook and e-reader, just slightly. As I said, that feeling of turning the pages, seeing the interior artwork, seeing the map, seeing the cover art, all playing a part in the narrative, and also seeing tangible progress, they are all really hard to beat, even though they are seemingly simple things. But to me, they are not. I think they are a part of what makes reading so fun to me. So yeah, I guess that's pretty much it for today's video. Do let me know your thoughts on these mediums and which one is your preference. I know that many readers now buy physical books only to display them on the bookshelves, but their main medium of book consumption are usually ebooks or audiobooks. And there is nothing wrong with that. Do let me know your thoughts on this subject, and as always, thank you so much for watching and thank you for your support. Bye bye. Lastly, I want to say thank you so much once again to all my patrons who keep on supporting me.